Welcome to episode 183 of the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and this show is all about taking a deep dive with the leaders of the credit union movement that make it so great. This episode is brought to you by Motivosity. Motivosity is all about building amazing company cultures that help people be happier at work. Through building recognition, connection, and community within your credit union, your employees are more engaged, and in turn, your members are too. Check out Motivosity, Motivosity.
Today, I'm having a conversation with Hector Martin. Hector is the president and CEO of County Schools FCU in California. And with that, let's jump right in. Welcome to the show, Hector.
Thank you, Randy, for having me. So cool to be on this side of the show now. A huge fan of the show, a huge fan of your podcast. And it's cool to be on this side now.
I'm excited for our conversation, and I appreciate the listens in the past. So I'm excited for everybody to get to know you more, maybe that don't. So let's start right there. How about a little bit of background? Where'd your career start? And, how did that lead you to credit unions? I kind of always make that joke that most of us didn't grow up as kids wanting to work in credit unions someday, right? Like we probably had other dreams, but now we're here and we love it. So what brought you here?
Absolutely. And thank you for mentioning that, because I felt a little bit guilty. Every time I say I didn't know what a credit union was before I get started. So thanks for the preface there. So I'll share a funny story that actually right before this podcast recording, I was on a call with someone else, and we don't know each other too well, actually a business partner, a vendor, and they alluded to a story that I spoke of at another podcast, and I talked about this. So I'll repeat it. I thought it was true, but she thought it was so inspiring. So I didn't know what I wanted to do right out of high school. What I did know was that I wanted to wear a suit and carry a briefcase. Yeah. And in hindsight, I think really I wanted to be a businessman. So I got started with looking for the most business-like job that I thought I could find in a entry-level aspect, right? So I started looking at banking jobs. Okay. Yeah. Most of us know banks, but no one would take me. Now I'm glad that they did it because I didn't have any formal experience. And I got a call from someone that said, hey, why don't you apply at a credit union? And I was like, what is that? So I looked it up and I'm like, okay, seems like a bank. So I went, so I almost got my start at Mattel Federal Credit Union. And when I interviewed there, I thought I killed it. I went home super happy, and then they called me right away and said, can you start tomorrow? Wow. And I was like, yeah. Now, that tomorrow was one of the days where I had classes, and I told them I need to start on a part-time basis because, I just started my undergrad. I was really scared of it and said, oh, this is going to be so tough. First person in my family to go to college. And I was really, really determined to graduate on time, right? And so I'm all bummed out. I'm like, man, I'm not going to get a job at a credit union either. But I wasn't even all the way home yet when I got a call. And this call was from John Hernandez. John is CEO of multiple credit unions. So he calls me up and he said, hey, I heard about your interview. I heard you can't take that job. Why don't you come over here and interview? So I did, and I interviewed there, and I got my start at Calcom Federal Credit Union for what I thought was going to be filing papers, but I think I did that for all of a week, and then I was on the teller line right away, and moved my way up from there. So John also was very instrumental in kind of getting me to where I am today.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm sure we'll talk more about John as well. He's been on the show. Let's talk credit unions a little bit here. We'll start with the challenges, and then we'll spend a whole heck of a lot more time about what we're excited about. You've been in the role now. You've been in credit unions for a while now, but you've been in the CEO now for about a year. What are the biggest challenges that you see that us as a movement are facing today?
Yeah, so I think there's a few obvious ones, right? The rapid increases in interest rates from quantitative tightening, liquidity, the compressed margins, and all of these are kind of very major to me and everybody else. I signed my CEO agreement the weekend that SVB Bank failed. So I was sitting there looking at the paper like, what do I do? And, we had a liquidity crunch. But those are the obvious ones. I think I like to talk about like the less obvious ones, which I think is because those are all cyclical. We're going to keep seeing them. They're going to come back. We learn how to deal with them. Although this time around, there's a few different things, right? But we learn in business school how to deal with those. I think that the less obvious one is more about developing and retaining talent in our industry. So I've seen that as and it's hard for me to say because I feel like I've developed rather quickly and I was at the right place at the right time with the right people, but it's not like that for everybody. And so I think that that's leading to difficulty in succession planning, maybe even contributing to consolidation in the industry. I don't know if it's directly correlated to that, but
Jill and I were talking about that last night, that exact topic, this kind of merger as succession planning, right? Like as the baby boomers retire and the perception that maybe the next generation isn't there or ready yet. So you're speaking on, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that really is a big one. At least that's in my radar that I'm trying to contribute to alleviate. So
let me ask you that. What steps, I guess, have you been taking or maybe even experienced in your career that, if you could throw one or two out there for somebody listening today who's like, yeah, I really need to work on that?
I think it's twofold. So internally with the staff, I want to do what was done for me. So John Hernandez and actually a lot of the other CEOs that I worked with, I was fully transparent. Hey, this is what I want to do. I want to be a CEO. And we knew that place was not the place where I was going to be CEO maybe. So what we did is we were both very transparent back and forth in the sense that they helped me develop and I gave them the best X amount of years there. So with my first job, it was a little bit longer because I was going through school, but one of them, which funny enough was county schools my first time around because I worked there beforehand. I was very transparent with the CEO and I said, hey, this is part of my career trajectory, but I think I see myself here 2 to 3 years. And sure enough, on my 2-year anniversary, I left with giving them the best 2 years that I could, put a lot of stuff into the credit union and they helped me. I mean, they were helping me get out there. So I really want to do that and give back because I respect those people tremendously and I want to get that respect back. If they call me and ask me for help, I'm dropping what I'm doing to help them because they help get me where I'm at. So I want to do that for my staff and I do have open conversations with the staff. Not everybody asks for that, but those that I see or do, I definitely want to do that for them. And the second thing, and taking it even bigger and thinking longer term and bigger picture, is the emerging Credit Union Leadership Council that I founded. I think that definitely is paying it forward with helping in succession as well as developing leadership. And even for myself, it's helping me develop. So I think between those two that's my little grain of salt. Right?
Could you talk to me a little bit more about the program that you started? Jill was talking to me about it before I'd reached out to you. Did you tell our listeners, give the quick commercial on what you did there or what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. And Jill's team has been a huge supporter and they've been on the show as well. We have virtual meetings. And so the Emerging Leaders Council it started back in 2020 during the pandemic. We were, when you get some sort of crisis, I think good things come out of it. Beside all the bad things, right? It's called a crisis because bad things happen. But so with the pandemic, we had a group of people that were already reaching out to each other, asking each other, hey, how are you dealing with this or that? Or you would come across something that helped you. And so you would send that over my way or to the group. And we said, you know what, why don't we look for a professional development group that we can all join, give our ideas and take some from as well. So I sought out to look for one and I couldn't really find anything that checked my boxes. Maybe my boxes were a little bit weird, right? But I wasn't looking for subject matter. I was looking more for credit union specific career development. So, we couldn't find it. So we started it and it was a few of us. And since 2020 till today, we have about 60 now, I think a little bit north of that, members. And what we do, so several things, but the gist of it is we meet on a monthly basis and we bring a speaker in. And this speaker talks about professional and career development and what helped them get to where they're at. So a lot of CEOs, but not just CEOs, also executives, also partners in the industry, and try to create that inspiration as well as knowledge sharing of how it is that you can get to the next level. So we do that, and that's been great, good conversations, but also we provide scholarships for people to attend conferences. We
very
also,
cool. Yeah.
we also bring in speakers that create awareness. So like Western Union Management School, we bring them on and they talk about the benefits of it and hopefully inspire somebody to go to that. And there's several other things. We have an Emerging Leader of the Year award ceremony that we do every year. This is going to be our third year that we do it. And yeah, really, I feel like we're a hub of people who we don't try to recreate a conference or an association. What we do is we talk about all of the conferences, associations, education that's out there and make a knowledge sharing kind of pool. And so that's been what I think very successful. And we've actually had 3 individuals, including myself, become CEOs during the tenure there. Now, I like to say that, hoping that we had a little bit to do with it, but maybe not. But if we can do that, if we can inspire people, which we have, that's definitely great to help us retain talent.
That's really cool. I mean, I think one of the things that we talk about like often on the podcast is like that network, right? Like the credit unions are a tight-knit community. And a lot of the times I would say like as a CEO, you have a team, you have a board, you don't have another CEO, right? Like, so to have that network of whether it's other CEOs inside or outside the industry. And it sounds like what you're doing here is, boy, talk about like creating a built-in network, right? Like as everybody's moving up through their careers, you're going to be probably a whole bunch of you that are all CEOs 5 or 10 years from now, right?
Yeah.
That's outstanding.
Definitely. And I think that most people think of the tangible items or tangible ideas that you can benefit from joining a group or share with others. And you mentioned network. And I think that one of the things that we share with each other or trade or even take away is new networks from someone knowing someone who knows the answer to your question. So whether you've quote unquote made it, because I get asked all the time, well, now that you're CEO, are you still going to be part of it? Well, I'm still emerging. So I'm still moving forward and I'm still getting a lot of value out of it. So yeah, I think networking is a big one as well.
That's really cool. I'd like to stick with that, with your network. You know, who do you have that you can bounce things off of, right? Like I've talked about it often on the podcast, like how important when we were building CUInsight to have the people that just didn't say, yeah, that's amazing. Of course, it's perfect. You know, like that would actually like go, what are you thinking? You know, I mean, like sometimes that's even more important. And then I can follow up with, please tell me more because I'm missing something, right? Like, do you have those people around you or?
Absolutely. So you mentioned the person that says no or why are you doing this? So I think that you have to have kind of 3 people in your corner, not necessarily 3 in number, but 3 types. The first one's the mentor, second one's the coach, and the third one is the friend. And that's the one that tells you got something in your teeth or why are you doing that? Or they can also be your cheerleader on the other side, right?
That's absolutely true.
So mentors, I have a few of those and they continue to be mentors. Sometimes you graduate mentors as well. You have to know when it's time to kind of, move on to the next one because the mentor, I think, is someone who can give you direct advice. They've been there, done that. And as you move forward, that may change. The coach is more of like, whether it's the same person or not, maybe it could also be a friend. These can cross over into each other, but more of someone who gives some of those soft skills, recommendations, or you can use them as a therapist or whatnot. Right. But then, and so I have some of those as well. They don't have to be directly in your industry, but then also I have the friend, the one that you can call a little bit less professionally. And again, they could be in the same industry and say, hey, what do you think about this? And I know that they'll tell me, what are you thinking? Right. Yep. Just like you mentioned earlier. So that's kind of what my circle looks like. And it's never self-made. People will say the term self-made. I think even those that are attributed as self-made have a huge team behind them even before they made it. So.
Absolutely. One of the questions, I know you've listened to the podcast, so you're probably expecting this one, was that one that I took from another podcast, which was, what was the greatest investment that you've made in your career? And the example, Warren Buffett said it was Dale Carnegie courses. You mentioned your undergrad and not being willing to sacrifice that. When you hear that question, is there something that you're like, yeah, that was worth it?
So I have one that's a little different, but yeah, the undergrad, the WCMS, MBA, all that stuff you think of as the investments that you make to progress in your career. But I think that one of the biggest ones, and I think of it as sacrifice and payout, that's how I think of an investment, was at one point I took what looked like a back or lateral step in my career.
Okay.
It was more difficult for me on the personal side with the scheduling, things like that, the distance, all that, even a pay cut. So most people would think of that as kind of going backwards, but it was all strategic. Every step has been strategic, I'm lucky enough to say. And this one was one that really paid out. So I spent a bit of time there, and I fast-tracked my learning. So it was very difficult because I had to do a lot of things, but going into this smaller credit union and helping run the show, definitely. And I did it because I needed to learn accounting. I said, if I want to be a CEO, I need to know the backbone of the credit union, which I think is accounting. And at that time, most of my experience was in lending. And so I learned board liaison there. I was in the board meetings. I learned accounting. We brought it from outsourced to in-house. And I'll tell you, you don't learn something until you have to do it and you have to solve the problem. You can read a book about it, but you don't learn it like when you get stuck. When you get stuck is when you learn things. So at least for me, so that's been the biggest payout, was that strategic move I made in my career to go to that smaller credit union, at least so far. So
I'd like to follow up with a little bit on that, because you're not the first person. I mean, even just in the past, I'd say last year of the show, I'm like instantly thinking of a couple other guests who've talked about like the lateral or perceived even step back move in their career to move the career forward. Like that they, much like what you're saying, wanting that, like seeing a gap, right? Like in your experience level that you needed to fill to get to where you wanted to go. How did you, like you said, it was a tough decision to do, right? Like, how did you, I guess maybe first, like realize that where you were maybe lacking in experience? And how did you, I guess, go through that process of saying, okay, like, if I want to get to C, I'm going to have to, go back to A first. I guess, how would you, like, kind of your thought process going into that and making that decision?
Yeah, I think it starts with having a long-term vision and creating a long-term vision for yourself. Something I do is I create a 10-year resume of myself where I want to be. And then I go back and kind of reverse engineer goals, right?
Okay,
and
yeah.
We'll also allude to mentorship here in coaching. That right before I made that move, I tapped into my circle and I said, hey, what do you think I should do here? And in fact, somebody in that circle, a mentor of mine, actually my current employer at that time, sat down with me and we were looking for jobs for me because I had already kind of tapped out there and I said, I need something else. So it really, I would allude it to tapping into your circle, whether it's your coach or your mentor, as well as taking risk, but don't bet your career, right? Don't bet your career type risk. Something that you can measure what it would look like if it went well and what it would look like if it didn't. And you have a plan C for both of those, right? So that really was it. And also trust your gut. We try to get all scientific about this, but a lot of it is just trusting your gut. So I would say those three things, the long-term vision, asking your circle and those that have done it and are where you want to be, and then just trusting your gut.
Can you tell me a little bit more? I've not heard of the 10-year resume before. So is this something that you like, do you schedule out time every so often to like actually sit down with this? I'm so intrigued by that. That's kind of amazing, right? Like it's that, if you don't measure it, stuff won't happen, right? Like or plan for things. So it's
exactly. Well, I don't think I've heard of it anywhere else either. So I may have coined it, but what, so if it sounds weird, sorry, but What I do is I create I guess it's sort of like those goal boards that they do. I don't do that, but so what I do is I create a resume of, okay, where do I want Hector to be in 10 years from now? So you put all of the stuff in that. So those are the endpoints, right? Those are the CEO here, or finished school and did this and that. So then that allows you to reverse engineer what it is you need to do to get there. And you'd be surprised at 10 years seems like a long time, but when you look at everything that you want to do, you'd be surprised as to how quickly you got to get to it to get there. Because sometimes it's one thing has to be done before the other. And so if you start too late, now you just scoot the whole project over. And you mentioned on how and when do I do this? I have a weird rule where every time I'm doing cardio, I have to listen to an audiobook. Every time I take a long drive, I have to listen to an audiobook. But every time I'm on an airplane, I have to revisit my resume. That is my rule.
Very cool. So you make the time to revisit it also. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're creating kind of triggers for habits, right? So every time that I'm on an airplane, I have to both update the past, right? My current resume. And sometimes you forget, oh yeah, I joined this board. You add that on there. But I also look at that 10-year one. So what that does is allows me to not worry about it. We all have hectic agendas and calendars. I don't have to worry about the, resume revisit task. No, it's every time I'm on an airplane, I pop my computer or iPad open or whatever, maybe even your phone if you don't have a lot of space in these crammed airplanes. And I revisit it. So it's been working out for me.
That's pretty cool. Like I said, I'd never heard of it before, so I was intrigued. Question about your building a leadership team and building a team in general. We talk about culture a lot in my house, especially, I think, with Jill. When you're taking a step back to the beginning, like, what are you looking for, when you're adding to your team? What are you trying to find? Are there characteristics that you look for in people? And on the flip side, is there something that, you're sitting down, you're in the interview, and it's just a no-go for you? You're like, you will not fit in our culture here.
I'll start with the no-go. I think someone who thinks they know it all, that's a no-go for me. There can't be two of us in the organization like that. No, I'm kidding. That's a
awesome.
Joke. But someone who thinks they know it all, that, it's twice as hard to undevelop that thinking. So that's a no-go. But what I look for in a team member is someone who, someone who's a team player, someone who's continuously willing to learn is something that I look for as well. Good emotional intelligence, because as I've heard on this podcast and several other places, we're in the people business, and so emotional intelligence is huge. So really, when I sit down and I'm interviewing, or even before the interview, sometimes I've asked someone to come into an interview, having a conversation with them outside of them even applying, and what it is what would I think that they would serve our membership and align with our dedication to our mission the same way that I do, because there's going to be tough times. There's going to be, on the branch level, call outs, and now you have to do a little bit more work and go above and beyond. And there's going to be times where the credit union is not doing as good as it used to. And you want somebody there who's going to go through those and know that it's all for, the long-term vision of helping our members and stuff. And that's kind of what I look for. All the technical skills you can teach, unless, you're hiring like a VP or controller or something. That's different, because, I don't want to do accounting anymore.
Yep.
So that's different. You look a little bit more technical there, but, and obviously as you get specialized, but other than that, I look for a people person, someone who's going to serve our membership. Our industry is a little bit different than others.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think today, in 2024, what makes a good leader or a good CEO?
I think that now more than ever, a good leader, a good CEO has to be a good listener and a continuous learner. It goes unsaid that you have to, have also emotional intelligence and be a strategic thinker and all that. Those I think those go unsaid, but to be a leader, you have to be a good listener and listen to really hear them out, not just hear to wait and say the answer, because in our position we think we should know everything because that's everybody comes to us, right, to ask us, and we're where the buck stops. So getting away from that, I should answer what they're telling me or what I think they're telling me right away, and really listening not just to employees, but we call it the 5 pillars with my team. It's the board of directors, listening to them, listening to the management team, the employees, the members, and then it even goes further into the community because those are potential members. So called the 5 people. So really it's just listening, because that's where you'll catch trends that are moving. And if things are moving and you're also a continuous learner, then you're learning how to adapt to those trends. So I've really used those 2 words kind of myself. It's at the top of my daily to-do list so that I revisit them every day as the day goes on, because I think we forget to listen and we forget to have an open mind.
I think that is so powerful. That's for sure. That idea of listening to understand, not to reply. Or answer.
Exactly. You said it much better than I did.
It's because it's something that I will tell you I have struggled with my entire career, right? I think often when, as somebody who, you're ambitious, right? Like you wanted to be a CEO. That means that you've been successful. You've done well, individually, but then to be able to, like, as you start leading people, it's not just all about how well Hector does something, right? Like it's how well your team does and how well you lead. So yeah, I remember it. And I'm sure it was Jill who was, when we were talking years ago, when we first hired Lauren, our CEO, she was like, your first question, anytime she says anything to you, should be, what would you do? And listen, right? Like, cause you don't have to just be like, this is how we do it every single time, right? Like, so
absolutely.
I just constantly think about that. So you're hitting a good nerve with me on that one. I think that was great. So, I'd like to talk about looking forward. How do you make sure, like inside your organization, that, as a leader, that you're making the right moves? We all have limited resources, right? Like whether it's time, money, whatever it happens to be. And financial services, our industry is changing very rapidly. So 2 sides to that question. How do you go, with the information that you have, making sure that your credit union's making the best decisions as far as for growth, in sustainability and relevance? But also on the flip side, have you figured out, like, do you have a process if something isn't working as well and you're kind of wasting resources, how to, kind of kill that project so you can, put those resources elsewhere?
Yeah, I think knowing what to do and what's working well is really just always aligning it to the mission of the credit union, whether it's the movement or your niche mission with your membership. Always going back to the roots as to why are you doing this? Because sometimes we get into the weeds of a project and you may start talking about profitability of that project and you may start getting excited about it. And next thing you know, the project is about the profitability of it and not the value that it's going to bring to the membership. So I think that going back to the root of why you're doing this is a good practice to measure what you should and shouldn't do. And then the second part of that question is, how do you know that you should stop doing it? If I understood that correctly, is our industry is not one of those fail forward fast industries. So I don't want to say I get excited when that happens, but I really try to pretend we are when that happens and say, hey, let's take this as a learning experience. We failed because we can't take the huge, risks that private companies can and whatnot. So I try to bring that back home to the team and say, hey, look, this is what we did. It didn't work out. And if it's not, do it quickly. We're a smaller organization, so it's easier for us to do that. And it's not tons of R&D that goes out the window and all that. But we really try to bring that back to the team and say, hey, we tried to do something. Kudos to us. It didn't work. This is what we learned from it. So that's kind of my thought process on that.
Any advice for the newer leader out there on communicating your vision, right? You mentioned you're the CEO. You work with your board to obviously set the vision for the credit union. So I guess I would say, both sides of the stream there, like communicating your vision as the CEO to your team and the rest of the credit union, but also upward. I mean, you became a CEO. You got 9 bosses instead of 1. You're a year in now. Any words of advice, to somebody who's either hopes to be sitting in that chair someday or maybe just recently was?
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I'm a year in, so I hope no one takes this as my expert advice. I'm still learning, and so, but I do have a tip that's helped me, and that's to be transparent both ways. Sometimes there's things that you can't and should not say because they can get misconstrued given the party that you're talking to. So if you're talking to staff who may not understand some aspect, it's your job to teach them and get them to the point where they can, but you may want to hold back a little bit until the right time is there, because there may be more damage done if they misconstrue it, as opposed to, right, let's say you're talking about some sort of loss and the loss is okay. You gain more from it than you didn't. You don't want them to take that and spread rumors and say, or get scared, right? But I think that transparency, I feel like I have a good relationship with the board of directors. And one of the things that they told me from the beginning was, hey, we'll instill as much trust as you need, but we need transparency. And that's what I've been doing with them. And it's been working well. I feel like if something comes up, I can bring it up and it's not going to take away all of that trust that we've built. So that goes both ways, but also transparency to the staff, because you mentioned carrying out your strategy and carrying out your vision. Well, every individual is going to want to carry out their individual mission. So if you have transparency from the board and management down to, lower level staff, then they're going to help you carry out your vision. So one exercise that we do at county schools is, we all know about the strategic planning session where you get together with your board and you come up with the strategy for the next X amount of years. Well, before we do that, we actually have a mini strategic planning session with our staff. We do a SWOT analysis. We talk about, and these people are in the front line. They
Absolutely.
know better than most of us what's going on there, right?
They're talking to the members.
Exactly. So we walk them through. They may not know they're doing a strategic planning session, but we walk them through the exercises very similar to the board. And we get that in a very detailed front line level. And then we gather this information and we bring it with us to the strategic planning session with the board. Now, we don't show them this SWOT analysis and this analysis right away. We go through our own, and at the end we compare. So we did that, and it was surprising to see how much similarity there was in between both. And if you do the SWOT with both, you can directly compare each one. And also some things we didn't think about and how detailed the staff was in theirs. And it really has been beneficial, because now we take this, we come back with a strategic plan from there, develop the business plan and present it to the staff. And this is a transparency, right? We show them, hey, look, this is the cross-referenced SWOT analysis we both did. And now they feel like they're part of the process because they were part of the development process, and they are much more likely to be excited to carry that vision on. So that's a very kind of precise answer to your question, but I think the big picture there is transparency.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I'd like to almost bring this full circle to something that we talked about in the beginning. You mentioned the development of, quite honestly, people in our industry, right? Like if you were to look out today, like maybe it's somebody who's doing their undergrad right now, what does a career in credit unions look like, say, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Do you think it's going to look any different? And is there stuff that you think we need to do to make sure that we are a place that people want to work,
Yeah, we talked about that earlier, right? Is not just retaining talent, but attracting talent as well. And I think that we are doing a good job at taking steps forward. So being inclusive of different, we talk about DEI, so being inclusive to everybody, and also I think there's the whole advent of remote work, and there's fintechs and decentralized finance and all of that stuff coming in, right? The list goes on and on. And I think that the near future of credit unions looks like it has to, we either go away or we get with the times, right? So it will evolve. And I think that if I maybe had some advice or could tell somebody in their undergrad now what they need to be able to work in this industry is kind of just keeping an open mind. We talked about learning, we talked about listening, and I think that the more that we do this and the more capable you are of doing this, the more you can evolve. Because I think our industry is going to have to evolve a lot. And given that, I think it takes a leader that can do that. So the industry doesn't do it for us. There's other industries you work at that kind of the whole industry moves like that already. You're talking about fintechs and all that. So you can work there and your industry is going to keep going because the leaders of that industry, that's just how they work. But ours is a little bit different. So I think I like to encourage everybody coming in or coming up to be open-minded to all that new stuff.
This my favorite type of episodes where I have more questions than I have time for. So I am keeping a close eye on the time, and we're kind of getting towards the end. So it wouldn't be the CUInsight experience without my rapid fire questions. So
Okay.
the questions are rapid, but your answers don't have to be. So what was the very first job you ever had?
First job I had was at a credit union. So I'm what they call the credit union lifers, I guess, right? So yeah, it was a credit union. Before that, some side jobs here and there, and hustling in school, some candies and whatnot. But credit unions, I got my start at credit unions.
That's amazing. Next question: is there anything that you're currently working on, that's taken up that personal growth space?
Yeah. So I like to call it Hector 2.0.
Okay.
So I think that the set of skills that got me from my start, right? We talked about the first job being a credit union. The journey from that to CEO was one set of skills. And I think that going from CEO now to great CEO or great leader is going to take a different set of skills. And I'm learning that very quickly. So one thing that I'm working on is working on myself and learning about myself and working with a coach to do that as well. So honing in those skills, more than anything, also working on those weaknesses. But we can't forget about the strengths. Sometimes there's an easy way to mitigate those weaknesses with your team and surround yourself with people that are good at the stuff that you're not, but also looking at those strengths and saying, okay, how can I make these even stronger? So one thing that I'm working on is, I'm finishing up my MBA, but besides that is really that next version of myself that's gonna go from leader to great leader.
That's fantastic. You mentioned it, and I think a lot of people that get to the CEO role, and even the CEO role in general, like it's kind of I don't want to say it's 24/7, but you run the show, right? How have you created balance? I know we were talking before we hit record, people ask you for workout advice and things like that. So how do you blend life together inside and outside the credit union? Any hacks you've come up with?
I like blend better than balance.
Yep.
Balance means that it's one versus the other. So when you do more of one, you do less of the other. And I get it. There's relationship, family, work, health, professional development, all those things that you cannot do all of them at 100% capacity. And the greats have talked about that, right? They were great in one thing because they sacrificed another. But I like the integration of or I guess the harmony of all of them working together. And that's difficult, but for me, I don't have a wife or kids, so it's easier right now to dive a little bit more, do a little bit more. So I'm in my yes phase where I'm saying yes to a lot of things and getting a lot done. But I think that my advice would be to try not to trade one for the other. So you got to find the combination that works for you and know that you can do all of them right away. And once you find that combination, try to work in creating a harmony between all of them, as opposed to I got to be good at all of them, right? So, and just know it, you're not going to be 100% capacity in all of these. So, I think that would be my advice, and that's kind of how I do it: is knowing that, hey, sometimes I really have to shut my brain off in this aspect when I'm over in this other. Talking about relationships or talking about friendships or whatnot, because it's really hard to shut your brain off when you're in this seat, because you don't finish your job and go home for the day. There's always, well, if I could be doing a little bit more, then I could be taking us a little bit further. So I think also learning how to shut your brain off at a certain time and transition into something else is definitely important as well.
What's the greatest album of all time?
I like Back in Black, AC/DC. That gets me pumped. Yeah.
There you go. This one comes from NCUE Chairman Harper. Who plays Hector in the movie, the biopic of your life? What actor?
Someone famous?
Yeah.
I would say, I don't know, someone handsome, hopefully, so that elevate my my status. I don't know.
Amazing. You mentioned audiobooks. I'm a listener of them as well. So what are you currently reading, or is there one that comes to mind that you think everybody should check out?
Yeah, I'm always, I say reading, but I'm always listening to a book. Right now I'm reading Small Giants, Bo Burlingham, I believe it is. And I read another book of his before this, and then I heard about this one. And it was just perfect timing because being a smaller credit union, you can't be everything to everyone. So I recommend this book to whether you work at big or small. And their definition of small is very big. So
yeah, absolutely, right? Most of us are all small, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you may be in that bucket. So it's really cool because he talks about how you can have tremendous success by not being everything to everyone or growing too big, because when you do, you lose some of the positive aspects that comes from a personal or smaller organization. So, and then within that, it talks about great leaders who needed to have enough reach to everyone in the company that they didn't want to grow any bigger, and they're immensely successful. So, that's the book that I'm reading. I still haven't finished it, but, excited to get through it.
That's fantastic. Well, I'll have to check that one out myself. Last question for you. When you hear the word success, who is the first person that comes to mind?
Future me.
I love that.
I would hope so, right? Yeah, and success, I think, is my definition of success has changed. You know, at first you think it's the fancy title with the big paycheck or big house or whatever you think success is. But for me, it was somewhere along those lines. But now it's actually kind of been influenced, because you see successful people that you're like, well, they're not as quote unquote important. Now, I think influence, it basically says that you've done so well that others trust you, and you can lead larger groups and have a bigger impact in the industry and whatnot. So I think kind of being future me being an influence in our industry and carrying us forward.
That's amazing. I love that answer, and you're the first one to say that.
I hope it doesn't sound too self-centered.
Not at all. I think I'm trying to think back. I might have lied, actually, but saying that you're the first. I think way back in like episode 10, Sam Paxson from Co-op Financial Services may have said a similar thing. Yeah. So I'm just going way back in the memory bank here, and I remember loving her answer too. So I appreciate that,
and I think it's been fulfilled too. Yeah, great.
That is fantastic. So, well, there you go. I appreciate it so much. I could honestly talk for hours with you, but we have kind of a hard stop here. So, but with that, thank you so much for being here. The last question is, if people have more questions of you, because I'm sure they will, what's the easiest way to connect? What's your poison? Email, LinkedIn? How can they find you?
I think LinkedIn works pretty well. Email also, and I'm sure you'll share my information with everybody. But email is Hector at csfcu.org, County Schools Federal Credit Union.org, and then I'll put my LinkedIn in the description. But yeah, anyone have any questions or whatnot, feel free to reach out, or ideas that we could collaborate on. I'd love to hear.
Absolutely. Well, I greatly appreciate it. This was so much fun. I look forward to our paths crossing in person, actually, and getting to know you even more. But we will link to absolutely everything we talked about in the show notes. So for all the listeners, make sure to check that out. And thank you again, Hector, for being here today.
No, thank you for having me. This is great, and I had a lot of fun.
A few things before we go. Make sure to check out our sponsor, Humanity, in the show notes. Humanity will help your credit union build an inclusive organization that attracts, develops, and retains top talent. Please also subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast player. We're on them all, so Apple, Spotify, whatever your poison. And if you're looking for a book mentioned on the show, a quick Google of the CUInsight Experience podcast book list, and your next read is on its way from Amazon. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you for listening. Y'all rock, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Be well, friends.
A few things before we go. Make sure to check out our sponsor, Motivosity, in the show notes. Motivosity is all about building amazing company cultures that help people be happier at work. Who doesn't want that? Please also subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast player. We're on them all. And if you're looking for a book mentioned on the show, a quick Google of the CUInsight Experience podcast book list, and your next read is on its way from Amazon. Or, like me and many others, you could get the audiobook. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you for listening. Y'all rock, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Be well, friends.